Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Colleen Fahey-Rush, EVP, Chief Research Officer at Viacom Networks and an ARF board member.
Welcome back, everybody. In the context of big data max ROI, it is fitting to discuss what people buy and why. And that's why I'm thrilled to introduce our next set of speakers. Nyhan, he's got a very big title. He's Chief Digital Officer of Cantar and CEO of WPP's Data Alliance. And Renee Smith, Chief Research Officer of Cantar, are going to share their work on connecting data for ROI and ROR. Help me welcome Nick and Renee.
Thanks everybody for coming today. It looks like a good audience. We weren't really quite sure what would happen at 4:30, but we'll try to keep you awake here. One of the things that you're going to hear from us today is we think you're going to hear some themes that were similar to what Stan and Keith talked about earlier today, sort of the so what and now what. We don't quite say it that way, but Unilever is definitely an important partner of ours, and it's clients like Unilever and other clients who challenge us to sort of stretch ourselves. And what we're going to show you today are some ways in which we've stretched ourselves around innovation. The first example that we want to talk about, and this will be a little bit of a tag team between Nick and I, Chief Digital Officer, Chief Research Officer, tastes great, less filling, however you want to look at it. Basically, the first example I want to walk you through will take a couple minutes on because it actually illustrates some themes that we're going to then carry through the rest of the presentation. So we have a new solution that we've developed at Cantar called Life Slices. And one of the things that it does is that it connects big data with custom surveys. And I'm going to walk you through an example of how that actually happens. So we were given a brief by one of our clients to take a look at differences between millennials and non-millennials and how they reacted to the client's product. In particular, the client had some hypotheses about perhaps things were softening a little bit with the millennials. And so this was something we wanted to help them investigate. So the way that we did this is we leveraged the sampling and the targeting capabilities associated with big data. For example, we had buyer behavior, the actual purchase behavior, connected to a segmentation that already pre-existed and had been projected onto the US population, along with demographics. So all of this data was already pre-existing, it was already connected. We used that to create what we call life slices, which are distinct groups of consumers defined by their real life behaviors and activities. In this case, the fact that we had these health and wellness segments already existing allowed us to test some things for the client. We then connected that to custom surveys. And this whole approach actually really liberated the survey because the survey only had to do the part that wasn't already measured. So before I talk a little bit about the results, let me also point out that this is a process that involves data management platforms, platforms for targeting surveys, as well as insights and the value add coming from the data. So the way that we think about it is that we no longer, and this will be a theme that Nick will talk about, we no longer feel that we need to necessarily build all the platforms ourselves. To execute this, we were actually open to the idea that we would leverage automated platforms from others, we would leverage data of our own, but also from others as it was available, along with our insights experts. And so back on the topic of liberating, this actually really liberated our insights experts to be able to focus on what they do best and to bring extra value to the client. All right, so let me talk about the impact. So just in terms of the results of the actual research, I'm just giving you two little snippets here, but it was definitely a process that allowed us to bring something actionable for the client. So particularly in the area of understanding that millennials weren't as passionate about the product, even though a very high percentage of them were using the product as teenagers. So it really said that winning their hearts needed to start sooner in the process, and that was something very actionable for our client. The client also felt that it was myth busting. We went into this with a hypothesis that maybe it was just the most fitness conscious who actually, maybe that's where the softening was, but actually for millennials it turned out to be across the board. And notice that, we didn't have to run a new segmentation in order to learn that. We actually already had the segmentation available. In terms of reactions from the client, they also felt that this was faster and better than other approaches they had used. So it was faster than doing an ANU to look at barriers and triggers in this process. And they also felt that it uncovered insights that they hadn't been able to get through other approaches. So if you keep this example in mind, I think that you'll see that it sort of illustrates quite a few themes that we're going to be talking about in the rest of this presentation.
Yeah, the way I would sum that up is in the old Cantar, there was 3 parts to that study: the sample, the survey, and the analysis. And we basically unbundled it, and we only did 1 part. The other 2 parts were done by KBM, who had all these profiles, and Google, who did the survey. And I think in old Cantar, that would have been a little bit scary. Like, well, we are the farmers and we are the chefs and we prepare everything and it's all ours and we do it all. And in the new Cantar, it's got to be much more about distributing, liberating the survey, distributing the work to other parties, even if that's competition. And you know, I was actually a little bit reluctant to come and speak here because I feel like coming to the ARF is like speaking to the competition, pretty much. But I actually think that I have to get over that. And I think we have to kind of get over it because in some ways, while we are competitors, the real competition is not in this room, I would argue. The real competition is not here. They're out there having data strategy conversations, IT conversations, CRM conversations, analytics conversations. And while we're doing a little of that here, that's really the competition. And I think this place and the ARF has always been about bringing different groups together. I see over at this table right here, we have Facebook and Twitter sitting together at the table, nicely talking to each other. That's the spirit I think we should try and capture and share. We actually need each other more because the real fight is not just with people outside of this room, but keeping up with the consumer and the technology who's moving faster than we are. So the big themes that we are dealing with in Cantar, and I bet you're dealing with yourself, bridging sample and census. It's almost like going from small data to big data. Oh, but that's not enough. You got to go back to small data again. And ideally, as Stan said, you go to a picture that communicates what the small data to big data to small data means. It's not just throwing more data at people. Leveraging behavioral data, as Renee's example shows. Bringing disparate sources together, especially purchase. And this is, we're revealing a little bit here, but in the spirit of sharing with you, because we're all on the same side. There's so much data. Where do you start? How do you prioritize it? If I've got a young researcher sitting right here, and we say, we want you to connect more data. Well, they're like, well, with what? Where do I start? So we have to start somewhere, and I think the answer is to start with purchase data, what people buy. Because every client cares about that, every company cares about it, we care about it in Cantar. It's universal. So start with purchase data as the data you must connect to, and then work backwards. Buy and why. And all the whys are things we already do. Segmentations, copy testing, brand health, pricing, retail assortment. All those things are part of the why, but you have to start with the buy. So that's our data strategy. And we're working with partners because we can't do it all ourselves. We have tons of data in Cantar and WPP. Even though we have tons, I want to be a bit vulnerable here and say to you, we can't do it ourselves. So we have to work with others and bring whys to the what. And by the way, that can't just be more expensive because Stan and others have told us they want cheaper, faster options too. So in the scheme of analytics, there's sort of the Italy version where Mario Batali is preparing these wonderful meals. And then there's the pret-a-manger version where you just get a decent tuna sandwich. And we need to have both because guess what? I'm sure you eat at both. And so do our ultimate clients. So if we're honest with ourselves, and I'm trying to strike a chord of honesty here, no one has all the data needed, not even Cantar, not Nielsen, not Facebook, not Twitter, not Amazon. And Amazon has a lot of data, but they don't have it all. They need us. And we need them. Everyone is protecting business models. We're fighting this battle inside Cantar. We have 12 companies. They all have existing product lines, profit margins, models that scale. We have to figure out a way to hold their hand and walk them to a place where they're actually considering cannibalizing themselves just a bit for the pursuit of innovation. And the fear of being commoditized as you let data out of a side door to someone else to use in their product. That's a scary thought. But we have to do it. And even Facebook, who's had an amazing amount of data, has started to open up a little bit more. If you heard about their topic data that just got announced. Twitter's been doing this for a long time. Amazon is starting to consider this. So even the big walled gardens are starting to open up a bit. And in fact, part of our job is to encourage them to do that with courage and not be fearful. A lot of data doesn't mean things rain down with easy answers. There's a ton of work to do just to clean it up and prepare it. And oh yeah, there's that thing, privacy issues. As we try to conjoin more data sets, we can't ignore the privacy issues that we know about, but they're real. So the challenge to Cantar, and I would actually say to all of us, is we have to open up and share more data. And we have to share even with the co-opetition represented in this room. So for example, does Cantar need to have a special mobile meter? And then Nielsen has to have a special mobile meter. And then GfK has to have one. And everyone has to have their same version, which is 95% the same. What if we just shared a meter and just got on with it? And then we could show people that we actually had a decent meter that could scale across different panels. Why do we need to all develop the same thing there and actually be slow? We could also share data. We could also share taxonomies, the metadata on top of the data. So my definition of Axe for Unilever is the same as Nielsen's, is the same as IRI's. We don't have 36 versions of the same thing. So there's some things that we could share that don't totally disrupt our business models. In fact, just make it faster. I would argue we should worry less about IP and more worry about keeping up with the changes on the consumer front. Let's also be more confident about picking our storylines, as Stan has been eloquently saying for years. And let's increase our value prop to the consumer, because when I look at Facebook and Twitter or Amazon, I think they're really future-proofed because there's a reason consumers use them that has nothing to do with research. People use them because there's a value back. Why do they work or give data to research companies? There's not enough data going back to the consumers, and we have to figure out a way to tap into that. We invested in a company, InfoScout, that's here today. They have an app to give people basically points and also rewards for their schools for scanning receipts. But this is basically an app-based business, and we can tie our research and analytics to that. That's the future of, I think, data collection, is consumer-based value propositions, not just marketer-based value propositions. So how do we do it? I mean, we have a lot of data in our network. For example, we work with 11 prime ministers and presidents around the world doing segmentations in their countries. We do media data in 50 countries where we see what people are watching and saying in the news. We have purchase data in 38 countries from World Panel, and then deep level census purchase data in the US. And we do brand trackers in 50 countries and segmentations in 80 countries. The point is, if you mapped Cantar, as we're trying to do here, we've got a lot all over the world. But it's not enough, is the reality. So we're working with partners, and one of the ones I want to highlight that's been a really great one is with Twitter. We have a Data of Now partnership, because as Stan and Keith said, I don't care if you've got all the data in the world. If it doesn't come quick, and I can't use it quick, it's no good. So the Data of Now partnership is interesting because it's really a symbol of how we look at data partnerships. I don't just want Facebook data or Twitter data or Amazon data to do one bespoke study. I need it to go across the organization. So for example, in Twitter's case, we can use this for awareness and customer satisfaction studies and use Twitter as a leading indicator. And then we can use it in a different part of the group for brand health studies, also as a leading indicator. Then we can use it in Group M, where we do Kantar media research, social TV ratings, so that they can plan TV campaigns using Twitter data. That helps Group M, it helps Starcom, it helps Cara. And then lastly, the PR units in WPP, they're doing segmentations to find conversations where the client's brand is not even mentioned, but they should be part of that conversation. So that's what we call data horizontality. And Twitter is a great example of that, where there's at least 4 different use cases for the same data set. So rather than going out and doing partnerships with 20 companies, I want to do one with a company like Twitter where we can check many boxes with one data set. And that brings our people together and it satisfies more use cases. So we're open, is the message there. We are open to changing ourselves. We're open to working with you. We plan to work with you, not all of you, but some of you. Some of you that can go horizontal with us, willing to perhaps overlook IP, perhaps willing to share some costs. That's what we're about. And we're only going to get the pace of change if we are open. The data from elsewhere. Stan mentioned all the data, deluge raining down. A very practical reality for our people. Remember I said there's a researcher here who wants to do something. Well, focus on purchase data. Well, what could I get? What data is available? Well, we had to do something very simple but kind of profound, which is if you want purchase data from Brazil, you should be able to enter it into a search engine and see all the data sets that are available to you right now. And there they are. There's just some. We have 500 data assets listed in our data catalog. A lot of them are owned by WPP and Cantar. Some of them are outside partners. But if we don't make it Google easy for them to find it, they're never going to use it. And we're never going to cross through all those siloed walls. So that's one example. The other partners I haven't mentioned yet besides Twitter, InfoScout, I mentioned RentTrack. We did a big deal with them, of course. Some of you have heard about that. ComScore. Again, we had some similar data. We felt they had data that could scale more, so we went with them. Amazon and SAP is self-explanatory. SAP is about mobile carrier data. SAP is embedded into mobile carriers around the world. They are able to extract data from the carriers and make it available for analytics. Factual is a company that maps mobile devices around the world, hundreds of millions of them. Where are they now? And then, oh, by the way, there's a retailer that they're very close to right here. We don't have all that data. Factual has all that data. And then Facebook, who's just been doing some great work opening up their topic data, and we're excited to work with them on that. So that's a bit about the openness, the partnerships, and I'm going to let Renee. Oh, you want me to click on it?
Sure,
okay.
Go ahead. So hopefully you can see in that first example of life slices that it reflects some of the themes that Nick was talking about in terms of being open to partnerships, the fact that we're trying not to do it all ourselves, the fact that we're bringing in lots of different data sources. Some of the benefits of that as well have been exactly that it's allowed us to be faster and cheaper, so increased speed and more cost effective. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of that right now. So one of the things that we've done actually in both Miller Brown and TNS, and they've got a little bit different offerings. One is a little more based on search and social together, and one a little more based on social. But one of the things that we've done is we've spent a lot of time analyzing social data and search data with some of our analytics teams to really be able to come up with leading indicators. So leading indicators of sales or leading indicators of what would have in the past have been brand equity tracking. And in many cases across different industry sectors, it actually leads by as much as, say, 2 to 3 months. So that gives our clients a lot more time to react, a lot more time to take action, and it's much more forward-looking. So would we have gone this path or thought of this if we hadn't been focused on being more open and connected? Maybe we would have, but it's definitely the case that those themes are actually leading to these sorts of payoffs for us as well, and for our clients actually.
But that's also cannibalism. We're cannibalizing ourselves potentially because we have a lot of business based on survey work. But we'd rather cannibalize ourselves than have one of, or someone else do it to us. So we're going to do this to ourselves in the spirit of innovation. The truth is that what the people doing this are realizing is that, oh, wait a minute. It's not that I have to base my business on the survey. I can base my business on finding the way to tweak the social or the search or the clickstream data such that it maps to the indicator we had before as a currency. So our job now becomes the chef that finds the data source we can now use that's new versus the farmer trying to protect the survey farm.
I don't know how I feel about this whole chef cannibalization sort of thing
It's,
here.
all right, well, we can move on. We can go to, no.
Actually, no, on the self-cannibalization. Another aspect of it is, this is an example from Millward Brown, but we've also seen TNS and Added Value doing the same. So taking some of our existing solutions, in this case it would have been Link for TV, coming up with what they call an express version and then a now version. And each of those has slightly different use cases. And you know, you might think, well, wait a minute, is everyone just going to buy Link now if that's the least expensive? And that's a possibility. It could happen. But what we're also finding is that there are actually different use cases. We probably knew that subconsciously, but it's very clear that, you know, we're finding that clients who buy Link Express also sometimes buy Link. Occasionally they need Link Now. So again, this would be another example of taking a risk, doing things differently, because we know we want to change and we want to bring our clients both the so what and the now what. In doing this, we're also, so the two examples I just showed you were examples of technology and data being embedded into our solutions. But we're also thinking of technology and platforms as places where we embed our solutions. So this happens to be an example for TNS, in which they've taken their long-standing conversion model, come up with an express product, so something that's not going to be quite as in-depth, but nonetheless it has important use cases. And it's being offered through the Zappy store. Many of you may know about that as a place where research apps, it's a marketplace for research apps. You know, is that competing with ourselves? Potentially, but we're also finding that clients who purchase something from the Zappy store actually also purchase other solutions that we offer. TNS, I should say, isn't the only one. We also have Added Value and Millward Brown solutions in the Zappy store as well.
Yeah, and Zappy store is right out the door, but they have 13 apps in there. I think 3 of them are Cantar. Again, this is an example. We've invested in Zappy store. Notice we didn't call it the Cantar store because we know that you're not going to buy everything from Cantar. And we just want to be part of the cheaper, faster revolution. And we want to see platforms like that succeed, even if it's not always about us. So we're open to other people getting the benefit of this type of thing, so it lifts all boats.
And this is another example of liberating. So in this case, it liberates both our own researchers to be able to focus on other value add, but it also liberates our clients because there are times when they have a very specific need for this very specific type of solution.
Data for media targeting. So this is a new model. 20 years ago, I don't think we would have thought that our data would be usable for the purposes of targeting media so granularly. And Keith talked about targeting and reaching the individual, not just segments. It is possible now. If you look at the traditional media space, they're migrating to programmatic buying and targeting individuals and targeting outcomes, not just a segment. So this is just a visual of how, when I mentioned before data horizontality, this is sort of how it can move across in WPP world. So Ogilvy and Mather has some messaging that they want to develop because that's what Ogilvy and Mather does so well. But then what they do is they take a little research from TNS and they do a conversion model, which is to see who would actually be open to actually booking with, in this case, Holiday Inn. So it doesn't matter how good the message is, you also want to be able to put it to people who are in the consideration set for Holiday Inn. So TNS does that segmentation off of traditional panels, traditional bread and butter panels. But then what they can do in step 3 is link that panel segments, the different ones, and they onboard them through KBM, which is a part of WPP, that has tens of millions of profiles in different countries, hundreds of millions worldwide. And they can do lookalike modeling to find people who map and follow a similar behavioral footprint to the conversion model segments, and they find 15 million people who look like the Holiday Inn people or that would consider Holiday Inn in section 2. And then Mindshare, Media Shop, takes those 15 million lookalike IDs, generally speaking cookies, although increasingly you can do Facebook IDs and Twitter handles and email addresses, and you can basically do your media against just those people. So you got your good copy from Ogilvy, you got your target defined by TNS, you got your onboarding from KBM, and then you give it to Mindshare, they deliver it to the 15 million. Oh, and then by the way, if you want to do some effectiveness work at the end, you can do that, of course. You can measure brand lift, or you can measure purchase lift and conversion. But that's the example of our data, and I would say all of us, we need to have data that can move horizontally through that process. We can't just be number 2 or number 5 and say, well, that's it, we're done. We have to have data that goes across. And we're unlocking our data to do that, but it causes some consternation and some questions of, well, should we be doing that? And are we leaking data out the side that might be less important if it's commoditized out in the market? And there's all this agita. But the reality is this is how the marketing industry is moving. This is how Group M is moving. And a lot of the other big media shops, we have to be part of that trend. We have to enable it. And if we want our segments in part 2 to be relevant, we have to link them to other business models like 3 and 4. And I would actually argue that even though Miller Brown and TNS compete a bit, Miller Brown should cut their segments by the TNS conversion segment, so TNS should be helping Miller Brown, even though they compete. Yes, that's what's happening, and that's happening in a co-opetition way, and we have to look for more of that. So we're connected, as we're trying to show here, and I think, Renee, you have a few more examples, right?
I do. If you can just hang with me, there's sort of 3 more examples, and what we actually want to show now is additional impact. But before I get there, I wanted to say that we tend to think of open and connected, at least Nick and I do, as 2 sides of the same coin. As he's been emphasizing, you can't connect the different resources if you're not open to actually making those connections. You can't find the right partners to connect if you're not open to it. So basically what I want to do now is just it looks like we've gone a little over.
We've still got 3 minutes
so,
and 54 seconds.
What I'll probably only do is...
They're absolutely riveted. I think they'll give us 10 minutes.
All right, what I'll probably just do is 2 examples. But on the topic of buy and why specifically, I wanted to talk a little more specifically to show you how the power of being open and connected is actually then leading to additional insights for our clients and additional actions for our clients. This particular example is an example of Miller Brown coming together with its meaningfully different brand measurement framework, in particular the brand power measure, along with Kantar World Panel, which has brand purchasing data. So the blue bar there would be what typically Kantar World Panel could measure. They could measure things about promotions. They could figure out who got converted at the point of sale. But by having the actual brand power measure and linking those 2 at an individual level, what you can now see is that the part that Miller Brown would normally be measuring, which would be about the brand equity and the brand power, is actually then able to provide some additional insights. So for an example, a client's able to see here that there are people for whom there's no brand power that are being converted at the point of sale by tactical sorts of measures. But you can also see that there are people who are being diverted. So there's actually brand power, but for some reason at the point of sale, there's a missed opportunity. We're just getting started with clients using this, but I can tell you, having seen kind of 2 or 3 of the case studies, that once you start to decompose buy and why in this way, there's a lot of really interesting actionability that comes out of it for our clients. We're actually also not just merging say attitudes and behaviors, buy and why, but we're actually also merging behavior and behavior. So this is an example of watch with buy, in which Rentrack and Cantar Shopcom have been able to look at the overlap across their purchase transaction data set and then the television households that Rentrack has. And so the result here is that we've got 15 million people for whom we've got the watch and
households.
15 million households, sorry, for whom we've got the watch and buy connected. Now certainly that's not the entire US population of households, but you can see that it's an example of what Nick talked about earlier of taking samples to census. And then, of course, with survey capabilities, then you can come back and go sample to census, back to sample. This last one is also particularly interesting since we had ROI in our topic. We wanted to, in our subject line, we wanted to make sure that we actually talked a little bit about that. But actually, Mindshare, which is part of Group M, and Cantar World Panel have also partnered to create some rich single source data and an approach that they call consumer mix modeling, because you're actually able to look at longitudinally who's changing, what's the effect of advertising on the switchers, on those who are very frequent purchasers. And they've been able to also combine media data. Some of it at this point is survey-based and some of it is passively collected. So over time, they want to get that to be even more passively collected. But the result of that is that they're able to give these very refined estimates of ROI for the investment, and also many additional metrics about how to invest, how to change the marketing mix, how to reallocate during the campaign. So this is just another example of open and connected. Yeah, when I first got to Cantar 4.5 years ago, we were connecting a lot of things, but in terms of making solutions, now that's really coming to fruition.
Do we really need a summary? Isn't it so obvious? We summed it up with 2 little signs. We're trying to show you, not just tell you, but show you that we're open and trying to connect. Is it all connected to everything? Absolutely not. We have a lot of work to do. But a lot of it is starting to get connected, and especially around purchase to other things. And that's what we mean when we say buy to the why. There's a lot of whys, but the buy is where we start. We already have great currency there in World Panel and Shopcom, and we're going to expand upon that. We also would like to invite all of you, co-opetition, competition, frenemies, whatever you want to call it, to partner with us, because we really do want to just get things done faster. We don't want to own everything. We don't want to try and start lawsuits about IP. I mean, don't quote me, but the key is speed, not trying to own everything. We want to respond to the types of challenges that Stan and Keith put forward, because they're going to give their work to people who are faster, not who own every part of the supply chain. And we want to show them we can be nimble. So we invite you, including competition, to collaborate with us. You might be surprised how open and connected we're willing to be. In closing, we've got some great websites. There's insights work specific to key regions, so we're not only English speakers, we speak other languages, and that's us. So we're actually on time. Thank you very much.